Imagine living a life so pure that even the slightest strand of hair on your body was deemed impure. In ancient Egypt, priests adhered to an extremely strict code of cleanliness, shaving their bodies from head to toe every third day to ward off lice and to maintain ritualistic purity. Yet these same individuals, bald-headed or adorned with wigs fastened by perfumed beeswax, were embroiled in some of the most filthy secrets of Egypt, all for their own amusement. Welcome back to History on Fleek. Today we tell the tale of desire, intrigue, and the complexities of ancient Egyptian society. Stay with us as we expose the power dynamics, sexual rituals, and the severe consequences faced by those who dared to engage in adultery or expressed homosexual tendencies in this enigmatic civilization. Think you know what a priest is? Think again. Ancient Egyptian priests were not the spiritual guides or pastoral counselors that we're familiar with today. Instead, they were trained technicians who specialized in rites that allowed them to perform certain tasks within the temples. Priests in ancient Egypt played an integral role in preserving the balance between the earth and the heavens. They acted as divine conduits, performing a plethora of rituals each day in the temple on behalf of the king. Despite their high-ranking duties, many served part-time and were rewarded with shares of offerings given to the gods. These priests, who were sometimes appointed by the king especially for politically powerful positions, were usually passed down from father to son. As temples grew in size and rituals became more complex, the priesthood expanded and became more stratified. Priests' roles grew more specialized, and often up to 4 individuals shared one position, each serving for 1 month before returning to their secular lives. As temples gained power, so did the priests. By the Middle Kingdom era from 2055 to 1650 BC, positions in the priesthood became commodities, bought because of the wealth and power associated with them. Now, not all priests were created equal. The highest-ranking priests attached to the god's cult served the deity's physical needs like food and dress. These high priests often held powerful, non-religious positions too. Others had technical roles like caring for the god's attire, reading ritual texts aloud daily, or determining when each religious act would occur. Still, others were part of the temple's choir, dancers, butchers, porters, or doorkeepers, all essential for maintaining the daily operations of the temple. Interestingly, it wasn't only men who served. Women too held positions in the priesthood since the Old Kingdom era, though their roles became more specialized and limited over time. They were involved in music and dancing, seen as tools to ward off evil and bad luck. Despite their varied roles and responsibilities, every priest, regardless of rank, participated in an essential ceremony each morning before dawn, the ritual reenactment of the creation of the cosmos. This ceremony involved intricate rituals, such as lighting the fire, symbolizing the first appearance of the sun's fire, and drawing the bolt, where the cult statue underwent purification, dressing, and feeding. These priests, though different from what we know today, held significant power and influence in ancient Egyptian society. They managed temple lands, accrued wealth, and some even held political power. However, with power comes the opportunity for corruption, and some stories tell of scheming and corrupt priests, giving us a glimpse into the darker side of priesthood. Now let's uncover the sanitized, untold truths behind the myths they spread about divine rituals and their indulgence in their own sexual amusements. Ancient Egyptian society, rich with its complex mythology and deep-seated religious beliefs, has long sparked curiosity and intrigue, particularly surrounding the topic of sex and its role in religion. The sexually explicit nature of ancient Egyptian mythology, coupled with the reality of the practices, was not just a part of their daily lives, but was often presided over by the priests, who held sway in matters of religion and spirituality. The myths and legends about gods and their sexual antics were meticulously constructed and maintained by priests. These priests held powerful positions within the social hierarchy, serving as intermediaries between gods and the people. Their influential roles allowed them to weave these narratives and embed them into societal norms, ostensibly for spiritual reasons, but potentially for personal amusement as well. One could argue that the explicit nature of the myths, especially those related to creation, was a means for the priests to exert their influence on society while enjoying the lurid details of their creations. Atum, the first Egyptian god, was said to have indulged in self-love to create his children, Shu and Tefnut. This tale, perhaps seen as vulgar in some cultures, was a cornerstone of the creation myth in ancient Egypt, and the priests held the power to narrate and interpret these myths. The graphic sexual details served to pique the interests of followers, keeping them intrigued by religion and ensuring the continued dominance of the priesthood. In another instance, the god Min, known for his perpetually erect phallus, was the primary god of male fertility and was strongly associated with sex in ancient Egypt. The priests played an integral role in the worship of Min. They presided over offerings made by men suffering from impotence, offerings of phallic figurines to the god in hopes of a divine solution. Was there an ulterior motive of voyeuristic pleasure behind such practices? While it's difficult to conclusively say, the possibility remains given the nature of the rituals and the power dynamics at play. Priests played pivotal roles in making sexual rituals a significant part of their culture and religious life. One of the most important of these was the rite of fertile fields. In the ceremony associated with the god Min, the pharaoh had to masturbatively plow the fields, symbolically ensuring the fertility of the land for the coming year. Although it was the pharaoh who physically carried out the act, the priests were the ones who facilitated the ritual, dictating its timing and process, and ensured the rite was properly executed. Another significant ritual in ancient Egypt was the sacred marriage rite, closely associated with the myth of Isis and Osiris. In this ceremony, the high priest would ritually copulate with the high priestess, representing the union of Isis and Osiris in a public ceremony to ensure prosperity and the continuity of the monarchy, many times against the will of the priestesses. Now, one might think, were there any consequences for this gross abuse of power that inflicted trauma and violated the personal autonomy of priestesses? Well, adultery in ancient Egypt was punishable by death, but priests were involved in managing the societal norms regarding sex. They were often the arbiters of justice in such matters, holding the authority to punish or pardon. So it is plausible to imagine that the priests manipulated these laws to their advantage to get away with horrible deeds. In their capacity as spiritual leaders, the priests also had an essential role in managing the explicit content of ancient Egyptian music and literature. With their power to interpret divine will, they manipulated and even enjoyed these sensuous and erotic expressions of love and desire. These expressions were not limited to heteronormative relations, but also extended to homosexual tendencies, as evidenced by stories such as the myth of Horus and Seth. The priests were also involved in the magic rites associated with sexual activity in Egypt. Spells to attract the opposite sex or to treat impotence were part of the religious customs. Being custodians of these rituals, the priests exploited their positions for personal pleasure, with innocent men and women, all under the guise of performing their sacred duties. Now, with power also comes corruption, and the priesthood was no exception. Some stories hint at a darker side of this religious institution, where scheming and corrupt priests exploited their influence for personal gain. Juan Carlos Moreno Garcia's extensive research presents compelling insight into these religious machinations. The temple priesthood, especially mid to high-ranking positions, was the domain of the elite. They enjoyed substantial benefits, including offerings and land revenues, allowing them a life of privilege. Entry into this sacred fraternity was often restricted to nobility and military personnel, and any aspirant of a lesser social background was greeted with contempt. What was the impact of this elitist exclusivity? Not surprisingly, bribery emerged as a common method of securing temple positions. Royal decrees were enacted periodically to prevent this fraudulent practice, but the lure of power and wealth often outpaced the deterrent. In certain instances, individuals were forcefully evicted from their positions and their rights usurped, leading to violent confrontations. Garcia cites the example of Teti, a priest stripped of his position and income for conflicting with the king. The corruption ran deep. There were instances when high-ranking officials were removed from their positions due to involvement in conspiracies. They faced retaliation, and their supporters were threatened with similar consequences. In extreme cases, conflicts between priests led to violent displacements, exile, and murders. The most grotesque manifestation of this power abuse is detailed in Papyrus Rylands 9, documenting conflicts involving crimes, bribery, property usurpation, destruction of evidence, and the search for influential patrons. The exploitation of religious positions for personal gains extended to the local level as well. Lesser priests, ritual performers, and even female Choakites amassed wealth and prosperity through religious activities. They exploited temple land for agricultural rents, creating a sub-elite class that perpetuated this cycle of corruption and power abuse. The priests, far from being custodians of spiritual sanctity, were manipulative power brokers, perpetuating an exploitative system for personal gains. This sobering reality serves as a timely reminder that unchecked power, even under the guise of religious authority, can breed appalling consequences. A message to those who know what it means in the modern world. This is History on Fleek, and we'll see you next time.